to get started, this year's findings was that teams that have faster code reviews have 50% higher software delivery performance. And I think that that could be a surprise, or maybe that isn't a surprise. For me personally, I was actually thinking back that through the research, I feel like I've seen this before, that teams that were using peer reviews and code reviews were higher performers. And so to help me out, I went to Ask DORA and I asked, how do you improve code reviews? And they told me I could work in small batches, about the feedback cycle efficiency. And so then I was curious, what did the 2000, I'm already jumping to 2414 report say about code reviews? And we see here, even back in 2014, the research, these teams that were high performing and able to deliver software reliably and quickly, that they were using code reviews, and it was helping them with their code maintainability, learning culture, and building that generative culture. So if we come back to the slides here, I think having a faster code review is important, and it's absolutely a place that we can take a look at. We can start to identify how long do our code reviews take, and identify if that's our bottleneck. It might be that today as a team, we already have fast code reviews, but it's actually somewhere else down the line that is our bottleneck that we need to focus on. Because if we can write code quickly and we can get it reviewed, but if we can't actually get it into production, then that isn't helping our users. So specifically in this year's report, when we were asking about code review, this is the question that we asked. So for the primary application or service you work on, how long does it generally take to complete the code review process? And the answers there were from more than 6 months all the way to we do not do code reviews. And on top of the finding that those teams that have faster code reviews have 50% better software delivery performance, we see here that a faster code review speed has a substantial decrease in our burnout. And so I was thinking about that and thinking about what makes code reviews faster, what maybe makes them slower, and looking into the research. And there's been a lot of research by a lot of different teams over the years looking at modern code reviews. And some of the things that surface up is about geographical locations. So, how many teams are involved in a code review and where they're located can impact whether the speed of your code review, but also that impact on the individuals that are a part of that review. If there's a long delay because of geographical distance, that the cognitive load of picking up, stopping, that can absolutely attribute to increased burnout instead of reduced burnout. Also, when there's multiple teams involved in it and they're potentially not located in the same spot, that how they interact with one another and the way they communicate with one another through those reviews can lead to some conflict and confusion and potentially elongating the process as well. But year after year, we see in the research kind of as the foundation that culture matters. And when we have a generative culture, a culture of knowledge sharing, and we distribute our work well, that those teams have better software delivery performance. And I think that we see that also leads to faster code reviews, because when you have a culture where in code reviews, we are working collaboratively, we're learning from one another, we're mentoring one another, we're spending that time to better understand the application, we can start to look at what capabilities we want to improve. So potentially when we're looking at improving our code review speed, one of the areas might be, do we have a loosely coupled architecture? If the scope of what I'm reviewing is very large, that's going to take a lot longer than if everyone on my team understands the application or the service that we're working on. It's going to be a lot easier for us to have those discussions and to do those reviews. Obviously, additionally, working in smaller batches. So if I receive a a code review and I open it and it's huge and I don't even know that I understand the full context of it, I'm probably, one, I might not take it on right away, but also it's going to take me significantly longer than if on my team, we have a loosely coupled architecture, we're working in small batches. When that review comes in, it's easy for me to open, to understand it, and to have a conversation with our coworkers about it. So we saw, last year about this importance of the capabilities that we found in the research. They build on one another. And as we read through the different research papers that have been done on modern code reviews, we see that kind of these outcomes that happen when teams focus on improving their code review process, it really starts to improve these different capabilities. So, if we start to ask the question, are peer code reviews, are they really embedded in our process? Are we doing knowledge sharing with our peer review process? And so if that's a yes, then ultimately, right, we're improving our knowledge sharing capability. And we're also that's going to say something about the culture that we have in our organization. But if we're not doing that, if maybe there isn't that mentorship there, if code reviews don't lead to knowledge sharing, then that's an area that we could start to work on from a culture perspective. When we look at how long those code reviews are taking, there's a lot of things that can contribute to that, right? Talking about that distance, how many teams are involved, but even just starting at the size of the code review. If we're working in smaller batches, then it's going to be easier to review. So it might be that the first step we'll take is to look at how do we improve our capability around working in smaller batches. So the other piece that I think comes through not only in the DORA research, but when you look at the other research papers that are out there, is through peers working with one another, and whether that's doing kind of peer programming or we're using peer reviews, that it's building that collaboration, it's increasing that conversation, it's increasing the kind of exposure and understanding of the software we're working on. It is helping us, understand the user and who we're trying to help and having those discussions. But also when those teams that are using code reviews to make sure that they're improving the quality of their software in that process. So when, it's not just, looking for bugs necessarily, but it's actually making sure that you're leaving it better than when it started, that it's those teams that are really seeing that improvement. So I'm sure you've all seen this one, but before we move to the discussion, I think that this always stands out to me, that when we talk about working in smaller batches and having our reviews be smaller, that there is also just this kind of inherentness of ourselves that, if something's overwhelming, we're probably going to be like, yep, that's just fine. Where if it's smaller and we can really understand what we're looking at, we're going to be able to better provide that feedback that's going to be better for our team, for our organization, and for our users. And so with that, I think we see across all of the research, and especially in this year's report, that faster code reviews, they matter. And they matter not just because it's going to get our code into production faster, but it's the impact that it leaves on our teams, the impact it has on our culture, the impact that it has on our well-being, and then ultimately the entire organization.